But what is it that every 10 years we got to throw a small, puny little country up against the wall and show them who's boss? This was their foreign policy. We need multiple theaters of war in the Middle East in order to ensure the new century is an American century.
So immoral and disgusting.
Yes.
So recently, Dave Smith was on Tucker Carlson's podcast talking about the dangers of listening to the neocons over the last few decades and the great destructive ramifications of that. They brought up some interesting topics here, so let's watch and let's react.
Racial collectivism always leads to bad places.
I totally agree.
You don't want to embrace that stuff. But if you're concerned about that, well, then the first thing you have to do is tell the truth. You can't keep lying to people, and you can't keep sitting here and going like, oh, no, the neoconservative. You can't say neoconservative, right? Isn't that Mark Levin? Didn't he just say if it's the neoconservative?
Mark Levin, who I also know. I mean, I've been in right-wing world my whole life. I know everybody. I work with Mark. Always gotten along with Mark. Always been nice to me. But yeah, he just accused the Trump administration, of anti-Semitism for calling someone a neocon. What he did was he accused Steve Witkoff of anti-Semitism.
Right.
And I just want to say, I think Steve Witkoff is, if there's anyone who is, has the hand of God on him, it seems to me, I sort of overstated, but I feel that way. It's Witkoff, who's like a thoroughly decent man.
Yeah, I gotta agree with him on Steve Witkoff. Maybe the best member of the Trump administration, has a deep felt interest in securing peace in Ukraine, which I can't say about every member of that administration, especially Mike Waltz and Rubio. Waltz is now gone, of course, but you see the neocon influence in the Trump administration, unfortunately, to this day. The other thing Dave mentioned about neocon, that term kind of being used as a pejorative now, yeah, it's because of the destructive nature of their wars and all the worst outcomes of them over time. Douglas Murray, who scoffed at the neocon word as, that the N-word, he said in the debate between Dave Smith and Douglas Murray on Joe Rogan. Well, it just so happens that Douglas Murray wrote a book called Neoconservatism, Why We Need It. So it's not like he was running away from that term when he wrote the book. Let's continue.
And who was running around the world trying to bring peace.
And also, by the way,
nations
who single-handedly saved 20 Jewish hostages.
Well, exactly.
I mean, I don't know if they were all Jewish. I think most of them were. I think almost all of them were. But I think they got 20 hostages released in the phase one of the ceasefire that he worked out. Then Israel violated the ceasefire, and so they didn't get the other hostages back, although thankfully the American was just released. But this guy, Witkoff, has actually done more to help those hostages.
So here's what he said. I actually wrote this down because I was really bothered by it. This is Levin on Twitter, Mark Levin, who works at Fox, which is like basically seems to have turned its programming over to advocating for a war with Iran. Neocon is a pejorative for Jew. Unbelievable. And this is in response to Witkoff saying, quote, the neocon element believes that war is the only way to solve things.
Which is so ironic because some of the worst neocons have been presumably Christian, like Bill Kristol. So that's such an absurd allegation. This whole throwing around the word anti-Semitism to mean criticism toward Israel is so stupid. It's so unimaginably stupid. It's the same as the woke left tactic of throwing around accusations of racism every time they don't like that person's argument. There's a saying on the right, I think it was at least partially true, where when you're called a racist, that means you just want an argument against a liberal. Well, now it's if you're called an anti-Semite, you just want an argument against a Zionist. That is how it's become. That's not to say that anti-Semitism and racism doesn't exist. It does, but the overuse of these terms make these terms meaningless.
So you have Mark Levin calling Steve Witkoff an anti-Semite.
Right. And again,
we've reached peak crate. I mean, I think Witkoff is Jewish, right?
Again, but it's I don't even know. But it shouldn't matter. It shouldn't really matter.
It doesn't matter.
He's American and he's on the side of peace, and so I'm for that guy. But the crazy thing. So I at one point in the debate with Douglas Murray, where I said something about the neoconservatives, and he went, the N-word. Making a play on the N-word or whatever. And it's interesting. I mean, Douglas Murray wrote the book called Neoconservatism, Why We Need It.
I swear I didn't know that he was going to bring this up prior to me saying that, but that's so true. That's the most ironic thing to come out of that debate. People that scoff about that term act like it's some kind of pejorative, which I do view it as a pejorative now, but it's not like they haven't claimed that word. Many of those guys, including Murray, who wrote the book on the subject, literally claimed that word.
It was his book. And so what happened was, for people who don't know a lot about this, this was their term. The neoconservative was not a pejorative term until the neoconservatives got control of our foreign policy and ruined everything.
Right.
And then it became a term that we'll call every war hawk. We'll be like, oh, another neocon. Now.
Yeah, and I can see why these people want to be distanced from that due to the destructive nature of their wars. But does it change their mind frame on any of these wars, including a possible regime change in Iran? No. They haven't switched their gears whatsoever, still propose any kind of forever war as long as it placates the Israel lobby and satisfies the military-industrial complex.
Oh, a lot of times we will use the term when, strictly speaking, this person may not have been a self-identified neoconservative. It's just become a pejorative for someone trying to get us in a stupid war. But the neoconservatives themselves, the original group, this was their name.
Oh, I know.
For themselves.
I was there.
And you were there. You worked alongside them.
I worked for that. I worked for Bill Kristol for 5.5 years. I was a neocon.
Yes, it wasn't into, and they had no,
An Episcopalian neocon.
But look, they had no problem using the term until everybody started to hate them. And then they went, you can't call us this. But it's like, no, you guys, this was your own term that you used for yourself. You can read their own documents in the Project for a New American Century. You read the Clean Break memo. They laid out what they wanted their foreign policy to be. I mean, literally, right? Wasn't it, oh God, I can't remember whose quote it was. I know that a bunch of them loved sharing it. But what is it? That every 10 years, we got to throw a small, puny little country up against the wall and show them who's boss. This was their foreign policy. We need multiple theaters of war in the Middle East in order to ensure the new century is an American century.
So immoral and disgusting.
Yes. And also that, and look, as anybody can read, I think we talked about this last time I was on, but anybody can read for themselves the Clean Break memo. It was written by Richard Pearl and David Wormser to Benjamin Netanyahu. That was like, look, here is our plan. And the break was from the peace process. The break was from Oslo. And they go, look, here's the plan. You know how Yitzhak Rabin and all these liberal Jews are saying we have to make peace with the Palestinians so that we can then make peace with the broader Arab world? Well, no. We got a new plan. We're going to break with all of that. We're not doing this land swap thing. We're not giving the Palestinians a state. What we'll do is we'll have America overthrow all of these other governments. That way you never have to make peace with the Palestinians.
Yeah, and it's hard to understate how destructive U.S. foreign policy has been, not only under the self-presumed neocons, but also those who have borrowed their ideas, like Hillary Clinton and, others that, again, don't self-identify as being a neocon, but they sure do have the same exact opinions on U.S. foreign policy. It all comes out of the Clean Break memo and the Project for the New American Century that wanted forever wars, to boss around other countries, to show us who's boss. It's just empire building and entangling alliances that are beyond insane and crazy and certainly subpar for the American Republic, and certainly have got us into dangers that are costly, led us to support policies that curtail our civil liberties, this legislation where critiques of Israel is considered hate speech, and the redrawing of hate speech laws. I think that happened in both Georgia and Arizona recently. This is scary stuff, and it's all at the root of it is foreign policy and forever wars and neocon ideas.
Palestinians, and you can just enjoy domination over the region. And from my reading of it, it does seem to me that a lot of them believed it. I think a lot of them hubris and,
did.
we overthrow Saddam Hussein. Democracy will sweep the region. Then we'll overthrow Gaddafi. Then we'll overthrow the mullahs in Iran. And then the region will be way better. Except every time they actually did it, it resulted in nothing but disaster, which really could have been very easily predicted and was predicted by wiser people than the neocons.
Among them, Ron Paul and Harry Brown and Dennis Kucinich. some distant leftists and some distant rightists, some distant libertarians all knew that this is going to be a horrific idea. And if more people would have listened to those people, we wouldn't be nearly in the hole as far as debt, bringing back thousands of U.S. soldiers in body bags or to suffer PTSD and other depression. It's crazy and ludicrous what caused all this stuff.
But all these years later, you either have to apologize for your role in this catastrophe or defend your role in this catastrophe and talk about how you still really believe it was the right thing to do. But you can't sit here and say you're not an expert and you're a Jew hater if you say the word neoconservative. That's not an appropriate response.
But if Mark Levin is calling the Trump administration anti-Semitic, Steve Witkoff, we're at the end of something and the beginning of something new. I mean,
that's right.
Right? I mean, that's so... I almost called Mark when I saw it because I know him, but I really love Steve Witkoff, and I think his decency... I don't agree with him on everything at all, but his decency is just palpable. I mean, it just comes through.
To call Steve Witkoff and people like him anti-Semitic, to call Glenn Greenwald and Dave Smith and Norm Finkelstein and Aaron Mattei and Max Blumenthal and all these critics of Israel anti-Semitic, it really just shows desperation. To be willing to call Jewish people anti-Semitic is beyond preposterous, and thankfully I think many more people than did prior are now seeing through that. And I have to agree with Tucker here. It's just a hallmark of total desperation to do that.
Concern for people, his reasonableness is just so obvious. And the effects of what he's done have been so great. Great for America, great for the world. So I was so offended. And then I thought, I'm not going to solve anything by calling Mark Levin and scolding him. Probably scream at me! But I did think, he's not stupid. If you're calling Steve Witkoff an anti-Semite on Twitter, you're losing, right? Is that what that is?
And it's such a, what's weird is that at the same time, because I know all of these people they'll be lecturing me about how I don't understand the gravity of anti-Semitism. And it's no, actually I kind of do.
Oh, I know.
And I would never just throw the accusation around like that. I'm very hesitant to ever call any person a bigot or a Jew hater or racist or any of these things, because it's you're intentionally trying to dehumanize them on the accusation that they're dehumanizing others.
It's scaring the crap out of people. I'm getting texts from people I really love personally who are very, very, who aren't paying a lot of attention. They just hear that there's anti-Semitism and I'm part of it, and hurts.
Yeah, if you are truly concerned about anti-Semitism, what do you think happens when just that term is thrown around like water to everything and anything, including critics of Israel, not actually Jew haters? What do you think will be the result of that? Do you think it will be more anti-Semitism or less anti-Semitism? Because I can guarantee you a subsection of the people that you hurl those accusations to will just say, all right, screw it. I actually am an anti-Semite. I actually do hate Jewish people. Because that is what we are seeing. I can't see how reasonable discussions don't end up better if your actual concern is to safeguard against anti-Semitism. To throw it around like crazy only guarantees the outgrowth of anti-Semitism as far as I've seen it.
Their feelings, and they're confused and upset. And it's it has such a divisive effect.
Yeah.
For real.
And
I'm a little bit concerned.
Yeah, no question. Great discussion between Dave Smith and Tucker Carlson here. I've talked about it before in previous videos, but that term is going to the wayside, just like racism and sexism has gone when the leftists overused it. Now it's a combination of right-wingers, neocons, Zionists, and some leftist establishment types that will hurl that term against anyone. It's just a woke tactic. I see it as totally indistinguishable from what was going on from the left wing in the culture wars. But just to get to the bottom of this, neocon foreign policy is disastrous. Let's go back to a Jeffersonian and Washington-like policy where we avoid entangling alliances, where we trade with everyone, where we don't have special carve-outs and subsidies for certain countries and their security, like we do now for Ukraine, the rest of NATO, Taiwan, Saudi Arabia, and of course Israel. Let's get the troops out of the Middle East and all these different theaters and close all foreign-based U.S. bases down. Get those resources back. We're 35, almost $36 trillion in debt, I believe, and our inflation is suffering because the U.S. government prints money to finance it. It's disastrous for everyone. It never pays dividends for the taxpayers, and the destructive forever wars have taken place throughout my entire life. In Afghanistan and Iraq and Somalia and the Balkans and Israel and Ukraine and Libya and Syria and all these catastrophic occupations that result in nothingness. I think Afghanistan's the best example of this. We spent billions of dollars, hundreds of thousands of lives, and over 20 years we replaced the Taliban with the Taliban. And I say we loosely because I'm not complicit in this. My criminal government is. But I do want to hear from you guys. What do you think about this? Is there anything redeemable about the neocons? Are you frustrated to the extent that they still have influence in the Trump administration and the U.S. government? And what do you think we can do to break free from the stranglehold of neocon foreign policy? Let me know in the comments below. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.